Good evening, and welcome to our last night of content. I've got my dog here right off to the side of me, so she's trying to nudge her way in to the class here. So she's a good girl. She probably wants to go outside. No, you can't. Yeah. She wants to come up. She's been left alone for a while, so we'll wait for everybody to join in, so please sign in. I do have openings for 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock tomorrow evening if anybody wants to drive. So just let me know. It's good to see everybody trying to join us for this last class. So we're just going to wait until I get a good amount of people here. See if we can hit 11 or 12. And somebody in the comments here, is tomorrow just a regular day? I'm kind of confused. Your schedule is just really giving me a headache trying to figure out when I can drive with you guys. Okay, so Hannah just took 5, so that's good. So Hannah, you can have 5. So I've got a 4 o'clock open tomorrow. I don't know, Garrett, if you want 4, I'll give you 4 o'clock if you want it. But trying to fill in any empty spots that I have. So let me kind of get out of the music here and just kind of go. It's a blue day. Okay, so that's good to know. It is a blue day. All right. Loose ends for tonight. So we're going to start off. I don't believe, and I thought that I had written myself a note that we didn't cover fatigue. I thought we were at the end of our class and I didn't want to rush through it. And I said, well, we'll get to it a little bit later. So I believe somewhere on my desk here that, Garrett, you'll take 4. That's great. That's good to know. So, gotcha. So we got those 2 times. In your notes, write this down. We're going to go back to talking about driving in hazardous driving conditions. And even though you don't think of fatigue being hazardous as in weather, it's not. But it is a nighttime. Can you hear the noise? My dog's got a squeaky toy. Hopefully you can't hear it. If you can hear a squeaky toy, put it up in the comments. That way I know my mic is picking it up. But my dog's having a great time. I think she knows it's the last class, so she's going to have my attention all next week. Okay, fatigue happens more or less at nighttime. So let me get out of this and go right into the PowerPoint that we were going to have. We were talking about nighttime driving, and there are 3 categories of people or groups of people that have a hard time driving at night. We know that older people do. Oh, you can hear it? You can hear the squeaky toy? That's pretty cool. Older people, young people, okay, and people under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Those are the 3 people that are having. Yeah, I see, Theo. I got you. We're all set for tomorrow. So I want you to think nighttime driving. Those 3 categories of people: older people, young people, and people under the influence are going to have problems driving at night. But fatigue is a real problem. We can face it during the day, but more so that at night because our body wants to go to sleep. Now, what I want you to do is somewhere in your notes, I want you to write down the time that you normally would go to bed for a school night. So right now you're getting back into a routine. So write down in your notes, what time do you normally try to go to sleep? Write down 10:30, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever it is, okay? So write that down. Now, there is something called circadian rhythm, which means that your body tends to get into a groove, a routine. Once you move out of that routine, it still wants to fight to move you back into that routine. So that means if your body, if you go to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock, Monday through Friday, if you're out Saturday night at that time, your body still is trying to tell you, go to sleep. So what I want you to do is to add a half hour to your normal bedtime that you go to sleep. So if we said 10:30, now we're going to take a look at 11 o'clock. So in your notes, 11 o'clock to 11:30 will be when you start to see the signs of yawning, closing your eyes, having your body start to shut down. So 10:30 you normally go to bed. That's when your body starts to shut down a little bit. But a half hour after that is when you're going to really start to feel the effects of the sleeping. Now, you may say there is no way that I'm ever going to fall asleep behind the wheel of a car. Now, be honest. How many of you watch TV or have been to a church service, and before you know it, all of a sudden, or maybe even my class, maybe another teacher's class, you start nodding off and your head starts dipping, and then it gets to a certain point and then you knock it back up. That is going to happen when you drive. And the thing that you need to remember is that every time that you close your eyes, the next time that you do it, it's going to probably be a little bit longer. And now that we've got self-automated vehicles, people feel a little bit more relaxed that they don't have to be so in tune to their driving. They don't have to pay attention as much when they're behind the wheel of the car. Watch this. This is a Tesla driver.
LA, and appears to show, as you can see right here, a driver asleep at the wheel. This is crazy. Asleep at the wheel of his Tesla. It's raising more safety concerns about the vehicle. And ABC's Trevor Alt joins us with more. Trevor, good morning to you.
Well, Dan, good morning. This is both scary and it's bizarre, right? This was recorded by a California couple on one of the busiest highways in the country, and in the lane next to them, that driver seeming peacefully asleep at the wheel.
A shocking sight just one lane over in Southern California.
He's totally asleep. This is crazy.
Clint Olivier and his wife catching that man taking an apparent cat nap, arms crossed as his vehicle drives down I-5 at 70 miles an hour.
It was scary to see, to think that, okay, so the guy 18 inches on my passenger side is sound asleep.
After more than half a minute, the driver seems to wake up, grabbing the wheel in a jolt. ABC News has not spoken to that driver, and Tesla declining to comment on the video. The company has said drivers are supposed to keep their hands on the wheel at all times, but incidents like this continue to occur. While we aren't sure what the driver was doing in this latest incident, it's raised renewed questions about the safety of automation in vehicles. Of course, more research is needed, but even Clint, despite his shock, sees the direction American transportation could be headed.
It was a scary experience, but also, hey, this is 2019 and that's the future.
Clint does make an interesting point. If the autopilot was on here, the technology worked. That car maintained its speed. It never swerved or drifted, but it is still a dangerous incident. And also, it is illegal to fall asleep at the wheel, even if your car can drive itself.
But at some point, it may be safe to fall asleep at the wheel.
It could be a monumental health accomplishment when the car works, but we're just not quite there
But
yet.
safe and smart are two very different things. You know what I mean? I feel like you should be awake if you're in a moving car in the driving seat.
Yeah, that feels like a simple rule to follow.
Yes. Life lessons from Eva. Saturday morning,
For the
ladies and
rest of
gentlemen.
us.
Okay, that's kind of scary. 70 miles per hour and he's taking a cat nap. Granted, it was only for 30 seconds, but do you know, just as we said when we were talking about distraction last night, 5 seconds, your car goes about the length of a football field. Good thing that he has that technology in his vehicle, and it keeps you in your lane. But other people don't have that technology. What I do want you to write down to know for the final is between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. in mid-afternoon are the hours that most people are going to be affected by fatigue. And the mid-afternoon is probably more for older people than it is for younger people. And I think most of you that have stayed up all night, you basically know that your body at some point needs sleep and it's just going to crash. So you can stay up for 24 hours, but what happens in the 25th hour? So there comes a time that you just shouldn't be behind the wheel. So get rest. Now, some of the options that you have, and what I want you to write down is find, if you are going to have to drive for any distance, let's say for 120 miles, and you're driving late at night. It could be now that you're in college and you're coming back home. Find ways to give you that boost of energy to just push you to your destination. So we're talking caffeine, your energy drinks. Anything with sugar will kind of make you a little bit more alert. Now, the problem with sugar, though, you're going to have a spike in your alertness, but then you're going to start to crash after that. Open the window. Cold air is better than warm. Having loud music, something that's a little bit irritable, something that's heavy rather than very relaxing, like dentist music. Have someone else drive is probably one of the best options. If you're in a car with other people, you start to feel tired, put someone else in the driver's seat. The other thing is just pull over to a gas station on a highway and just go to the corner of the parking lot and just put your chair back a little bit and take a power nap for about 20 minutes to, 40 minutes. Just that short a bit will take the edge away of your eyes starting to close. So let me show you one more clip that they did, a study on fatigue. So let me show you this.
Back at 7:44 this morning on Today investigates a serious hazard facing young drivers that is often overlooked. NBC's senior investigative correspondent Lisa Myers is in Bethesda, Maryland with details. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Meredith. We're talking about driving while tired. We've all done it, but experts say it's particularly dangerous for teens. Fatigue is a factor in at least 100,000 crashes every year, and most of those involve young drivers who get behind the wheel when they're drowsy and never make it home.
I sit and I replay that night over and over and over again, and I thought, I'm just so close to home. I can make it.
That night, Rusty Burris was 18 years old with a bright future. But driving home from his girlfriend's house, his life changed forever.
I knew I was tired, but I didn't really feel that I was that tired. And driving home, I got just a mile from home and fell asleep at the wheel.
In seconds, Rusty's car drifted off this country road and rolled over. The impact crushed his roof and his spine. Rusty would never walk again.
I've fallen asleep and crashed my car one time, and that's all it took.
Experts say every day, millions of teens are dangerously tired when they get behind the wheel. More than a third of teens say they drive drowsy on a regular basis, and more than half of all fatigue-related crashes involve drivers under 25.
It's a huge problem, and it's probably bigger now than it was in the past.
Tom Balkin is president of the National Sleep Foundation. He says adolescents go through changes in their circadian rhythms that make it nearly impossible for them to fall asleep before 11 p.m. Combine that with early morning classes, after-school jobs, and late-night socializing, and it's easy to see why teens are chronically sleep-deprived.
The average college student needs about 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. Virtually none of them get that. In fact, they average 6 hours of sleep per night.
So how can fatigue affect their driving?
Today's show, how may I help you?
To find out, we set up an unscientific experiment with 3 Today Show interns, Patrick, Meredith, and Brian, all college students who habitually drive after not much sleep.
Last summer, I was driving tired almost every day.
When it's final season, there's no sleep. That's when the drowsy driving starts to kick in.
For our experiment, we kept our kids up for an entire night, no naps or caffeine. Experts told us that would simulate the level of fatigue students typically suffer after a week of insufficient sleep.
You don't want to hit a cone.
Then we brought them here to the Skip Barber Driving School in Connecticut, where with safety instructors by their side, we put them through 2 road tests, a tight, twisty loop, and an emergency lane change.
We're testing today their ability to instantaneously react
to an unexpected situation.
Hitting any cones would be the equivalent of a crash in the real world. The day before, all three had driven these courses wide awake and aced them.
I haven't hit any cones, and I think it's not that hard.
I feel pretty confident. Once you got the hang of it, it wasn't that bad.
But watch the difference when they're drowsy. Our kids swerve wildly through turns, hitting cone after cone after cone.
If that had been a real world situation, he would have had a pretty violent crash.
Inside the car, you'd never know it. Even as they crash, our drowsy students remain slack-jawed and dazed. Patrick clearly is giddy. He almost seems drunk.
In many ways, driving drowsy is very much like driving drunk.
We showed the video to Tom Balkin, our sleep expert. He says drowsiness, like alcohol, can severely impair a driver's reflexes, judgment, and awareness. Should parents be as worried about kids driving when they're too tired as they are about them texting while driving or driving drunk?
Absolutely.
Especially, he says, on long, boring roads like the one where Rusty crashed. So we also tested our kids on this monotonous 2-mile track, each driving it for half an hour.
At first I thought I did okay. You know, I thought I was in control.
But their dead stares tell a different story. Balkin says these are signs of a dangerous condition called microsleeps, where your eyes stay open, but your brain is falling asleep.
And this is the kind of situation where anything unexpected actually could throw them.
Like these surprise cones. We put them up on our kids' final lap to simulate a stopped car or a person unexpectedly in their path. Before the test, we made sure an alert driver could easily stop in time. But watch our drowsy kids.
Whoa.
They're so disoriented, they barely hit the brakes.
Whoa, okay, that was fun. I just killed somebody, didn't I?
Imagine if that cone had been someone's pet or child.
After I sat there for a minute and realized what I did, that's a tough pill to swallow.
That was an eye-opener because that thing that you never know is going to happen that will just come out of nowhere. That's what you have to be prepared for. And if you're tired, you might not be.
A realization that came too late for Rusty Burris.
When you're tired, stop. Don't push it. Because even though you've only got a mile left, you could be throwing your entire life away trying to drive one more mile.
Now, sleep experts say parents should treat drowsy driving just like drunk driving. Tell your kid if he's tired to call you. You'll come pick him up. Or if he gets tired on a long drive, tell him to pull off the road, get some caffeine, and take a 20-minute nap. That should help revive him. Meredith?
All right, Lisa Myers, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not lying. It happens to everybody. Okay, you are going to get fatigued behind the wheel of a car. Now, when you saw the young drivers making those turns with the cones, and the reason why they were leaving their lane the next day, being fatigued, is that there is a split-second delay in your mind communicating with your hands and your feet. And this is why you're going to see it more in your braking. When you're really fatigued and you're making mistakes driving, it's going to be in your turning and your braking. It's not going to be maintaining speed. You're going to probably be okay with that. It's the brake. It's not knowing how much pressure to put on the brake pedal to make a turn, or your hands to make that turn. And that's where you're going to be leaving the road and hitting things. Okay? I find that students that I drive with early Saturday morning sometimes drive that way because they've been up, okay, all night long, playing video games till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then they forget, oh yeah, I'm driving at 8 or 9, and we get out driving, and they're not at their best. So I just want to make sure that we highlighted that and you have a basic understanding of how that works and when you're most vulnerable between 12 and 6 and mid-afternoon for older people. The other thing that we didn't talk about too much was animals and hitting an animal. If you ever hit a domesticated animal like a dog, you are required to contact the police. Also, you should be looking for the owner of that pet. I will tell you, the worst thing that's ever happened in the driver's ed car, we did many, many years ago. I mean, I'm talking probably 25, 30 years ago. We did hit a dog, and we killed the dog. We had to call the police and we had to find the owner, and eventually we did. The dog was not on a leash or on a run, which it should have been, and it was chasing something. It was not the student's fault. I couldn't even use my instructor brake. I couldn't grab the wheel. It just happened that quick. You're going to find animals will run out in front of you. So what do you do? All right? If it's a pet, a cat, a dog, you do try to avoid it, but not at the cost of crossing the center line and hitting another vehicle or hitting a pedestrian. Sometimes in life we have to make choices, and they're going to be hard choices, but never put human life over animal life, ever. All right? Okay, it's very difficult to talk to an owner about hitting a pet, but it's even worse if you were to hit a child. You went off the edge of the road and you hit someone on the sidewalk that was walking. Okay, that's a harder conversation to have. Now, here's my philosophy when it comes to wildlife. Anything that's bigger than a microwave, you should try to avoid. Anything that's smaller than a microwave, like a toaster oven, raccoon, squirrels, chipmunks, you name it, okay? We try to avoid it, but for the most part, hold your position and keep the steering wheel tight and just keep going, all right? But we do try. We do try. I'll tell you a funny story. I had a student, and we were coming upon roadkill that was on the road. And in roadkill, you should try to avoid, too. I mean, you don't want to hit anything with your car. Nothing. Debris. But we were coming up on a squirrel that had been hit. It was dead, but it was windy. And the tail was moving. And the student just saw the tail moving. And I said, just don't hit the dead squirrel. Apparently, they didn't hear the word dead. No lie. She took her hands off the wheel and she covered her eyes because she didn't want to see herself hitting the squirrel. I had to grab the steering wheel so we didn't go off the edge of the road. You do not want to do that. Okay, keep your hands on the wheel, move to the right, move to the left, go a little bit slower, but try to avoid, anything that's in the road. All right, now, I want you to write down, there are 4 types of animals that we find in New Hampshire that will be a problem for you, okay? Moose, the biggest of wildlife that we have, okay? A moose comes in front of you, they're going to win. They're going to do some major damage. So we've got moose, deer, bear, and turkeys, all right? Those are the 4 that you really have to watch out for. Turkeys actually will get up airborne, and they could hit the grill or hit the windshield. And usually they're in a flock. Okay, there's going to be more than just one. So if you see one, there's going to probably be more around. Same thing with deer, especially if it's a doe. The mother could be around the baby, so be careful of that. So this is the wildlife video that New Hampshire provided to all the driving instructors.
There are approximately 1,500 collisions reported between wildlife and motor vehicles. On average, 1 to 2 people are killed and over 1,300 people are injured in these collisions. The average cost for repairs to a vehicle involved in a collision with a deer, a bear, or a turkey is around $4,000. However, vehicle repair costs after hitting a moose average $23,000. There are 4 wild animals that can cause significant vehicle damage or personal injury. The following video focuses primarily on moose. But keep in mind, you're more likely to hit a bear, a turkey, or deer on New Hampshire's roadways. If you want to lessen your chances of hitting a wild animal, please listen carefully to and abide by the following safe driving instructions.
Wildlife can cross the road anywhere. You need to be constantly scanning the sides of the roads. If you do see wildlife, slow down and be aware that at night your visual acuity is greatly impacted. You simply cannot see what is coming up onto the roadbed. So you need to drive slower to account for the fact that at any moment something may pop into the road.
I looked in the mirror to see if I could cut in, and I couldn't. I looked ahead, and 10 yards from me was this big bull moose standing there. And I never had time to touch the brakes. My mind said moose, bang, it was that quick.
The moose fell on top of right on my roof, and then crushed my roof and my head and everything in the process, and broke my spinal cord.
You see that big thing standing in the road, and you stop and you look and you realize you're looking at one big, living, moving animal. And they are. I mean, even for me, as many as I've seen around here, when I see just that one stopped and looking at you, that's a big animal.
Moose are large, somewhat homely, but as John Sutton and Dartmouth Hitchcock calls them, majestic animals. They reflect our environment.
Well, moose are perfectly adapted to live in the North Country. Their legs are 4 feet long. They're almost 6 feet tall or better at the shoulder. They weigh about 1,000 pounds on average as an adult. They can weigh as much as 1,400 pounds. They have a very heavy hide and very thick hair coat. They are just perfectly adapted to the cold and deep snow. If you hit a moose going faster than 55 miles per hour, these animals are 6 feet tall or better at the shoulder. You hit them at the leg, at the height of their legs. They clear the legs out from underneath them. Their body comes down. If you are going better than 55 miles an hour, your vehicle is continuing at quite a rate of speed as the body is falling down. The body hits either in your windshield or right on top of the roof. And that's 1,000 pounds that's coming through the windshield at you or coming down on top of the roof.
There's a couple things that happen to the people in the front seat. Normally, the first thing that happens is they obviously get covered with glass because of all that fragmentation from the windshield being destroyed. Secondly, the roof tends to collapse down on top of them, and because of that, they usually end up with either head injuries, neck injuries, spinal injuries of some sort.
They're covered with ticks, particularly in the earlier part of the year. Thousands of them. They then find themselves into the clothes and hair of the occupants of the vehicle. And they're unpleasant. They don't cause illness. They just require removal. The animal may bleed, and very often when they're inside the vehicle, their sphincters relax. And so they defecate and let loose their bowels within the vehicle.
The moose was on top of the vehicle, and after when it got over the initial shock of being hit, it started struggling, and the moose actually kicked out one of the rear windows while it was on top of her car.
And that salt that we've been using all winter long on the roads is something that moose desperately need come spring. So they will come out to the road to utilize the salt, and they'll continue to do that all through the spring, summer, and early fall months.
And they're so black you don't see them till you're right on top of it. People say, oh, you can't see a moose? You know, it's so big. But they blend in. Your headlights, you know, finally will pick them up.
The other thing, at least especially up in the North Country, but it's helpful anywhere, I would say, is to scan the roadway a lot when you're driving, really pay attention. To look further down the roadway than I think a lot of people are kind of trained to look more directly in front of their car rather than looking at the furthest point that they can see when they're driving, which would give them time to react and prevent a collision. It's difficult with moose because they're just so hard to see, especially at night. You usually don't see them until you're right up on them.
When it's getting dusk to dark, use your high beams. You turn your headlights on, use your high beams. Obviously not at other cars coming at you, but if you're out there by yourself, flip your high beams up. Watch your speed. Keep it down. Leave yourself enough time so if something jumps out in front of you, hopefully you can at least slam on your brakes and either minimize the damage or just not get involved at all.
Their eyes do reflect light, but because they're so tall, I mean, their head can be 7 feet above the tarmac. you're not looking that high off the roadway in order to see that eye shine. And typically they may not be turning to look at you because moose, because they're so large, really aren't afraid of very much. So they may be looking down the road, they may be looking directly across the road. It's hard to see them at night.
Moose are the largest animals in the woods. They are afraid of nothing.
Moose that don't run are moose that live for another day. The worst thing they can do is run from their primary predator, which is a wolf pack. So they have evolved to stand their ground, which also makes it not very good for them when a car is approaching. A lot of moose will stand their ground if they consider it to be a threat rather than run.
And what we have to remember is this is a factor of an animal who is not afraid of a car or a human being or a tractor trailer. They have no issues with that, and they tend to just stroll out and do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it.
And you don't know really when they're going to bust right out of the woods and make a run across the road. So when you are in moose country and it says watch for moose, heads up, pay attention to it.
Drive 55, keep your high beams on whenever possible, and scan for something coming up into the road.
You're going to lose. You're just going to lose if you hit one. And the hard part is maybe you'll survive, but your friends won't.
Okay, now the thing about animals, wildlife, is that you're going to probably have more of a situation encountering them in the evening time. So write down your notes. As they said in the last 15 seconds that we just heard, have your high beams on, because your high beams allow you to see longer down the road and wider. Okay, high beams just isn't for going forward a longer distance. It opens up your peripheral vision more. And the problem with low beams is by the time that a animal lingers into your headlight illumination, you're not able to react to it with the speed that you're going. So high beams will help you on your back roads. So be scanning off to the side, even on these back roads, because that's where you're going to see those eyes reflecting. So I thought that was a pretty good video, and this is kind of old now. This is probably about 20 years old. But the state provided that to us, and I thought it was pretty good. And we do see moose around here. I haven't seen a moose in the Durham area, but we have come across bear, fox, turkey. Those are just to name a few. And someone from this class has, I think it was Nadia, when she was driving, we came across deer that were out on the roadway or near the roadway when we were driving. So this does happen. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about that we weren't able to cover is how to fill up your vehicle with fuel. And you may think, well, I know how to do that. Well, it's because you've done it. But I'll guarantee there are at least 2 or 3 of you in this class that have never gone to a gas station and put fuel into a car. Now, I can't have you do that right now because the state doesn't want me having you touch anything on the outside. So once you get in the car after I've wiped it down, you're basically stuck there. But this is something that I usually like to instruct people on what to do. So let's kind of go through a few tips of what to do with pumping our gas. First thing is you should know what type that goes into your vehicle. This was part of our homework the first week. Do you need 87 octane, 91, 93? Because you don't want to put the wrong type of fuel in your vehicle because it will not run properly. But we also want to save fuel. We don't want to waste it. So don't idle excessively. So that means in a parking lot, keep your car turned off. Aggressive driving, which is meaning accelerating to stop signs and red lights and things like that, or accelerating really quick when you don't have to. Using your cruise control when traffic is light. And what we have found with air conditioning is that on the highway, it is better to have your air conditioning on, but at lower speeds, below 35, you actually get better gas mileage with your windows down. So 35 miles per hour is that point where your comfort, above it should be air, below it should be windows. And then you're going to really be pushing your miles per gallon to its max. Anything that you put on the roof of your vehicle, is going to create wind resistance, which is going to cause you to use more fuel. And when I say back off the bling, I'm talking about changing your vehicle, adding spoilers, adding wider tires. Anything that you're adding to your vehicle may add drag, and that's going to cut down on your gas mileage. Keep your tires inflated. I put that on my notes. That'd probably be number one. Keep your tires inflated. It's going to give you best traction and best gas consumption. It's going to give you your best fuel economy. Oil, we talked about the gas. We didn't talk. Oil should always be maintained, which means that you should have it changed every 3,500 miles to 5,000. If you're on a synthetic oil, you can go just a little bit longer. And that's why my warning light was on for a while, about a week ago, is because I was in need of an oil change, which I had done last week. Gas prices are lowest midday on Tuesdays and Wednesdays usually, so avoid filling up on the weekends. During holidays, when there's a lot more people out on the road, like we saw this past weekend, gas is dense when cold, so fill up early morning or late in the evening. Because remember, gas, being a fluid, can have contaminants. So you want to make sure that you're getting as pure of gas or fresh gas as possible. And I saw a video earlier this morning when I was just doing some research on a few things about possibly getting a new driver's ed vehicle, is that after a week or two, gas gets stale. Think of it like opening up a can of soda, and you know how you go back to it maybe a day or two later and it doesn't have any fizz? Gas is almost the same type of thing, meaning that it just isn't the same. It's not as good as it was when you first had it pumped. This is why you're always trying to go to a gas station that has a lot of activity, because they're running out of fuel and getting more fuel brought in, so it's not sitting underneath in the ground for any long period of time like you may find in some of these country roads. Don't top off your tank. That's something that you find at the tank usually. Check what websites if you're looking to get the best. And by the way, Durham has some of the lower prices right now. Dover's extremely high. Rochester's between Durham and between Dover and Durham. So I always shop where I get my gas. I always try to get within a few pennies of what the lowest price is around. I stay away from Dover. Dover's always high. Portsmouth's not too bad. Near the Circle is not too bad. I'm going to show you this at the end. This is people that have not really learned what to do, the etiquette of pumping gas. I'll show you that at the end. It's kind of funny. That'll be the last thing we go. So for pumping safety, if you don't like the smell of gas, sometimes they give you paper towels or plastic gloves that you can use when you pump gas. Of course you're not going to smoke. I mean, that's a given. Don't smoke around a vehicle. Of course it's going to ignite. Now, also be careful about static electricity, because there is fumes when you're pumping and holding the handle up against your car. Okay, there's fumes coming out of your engine. So if you're touching your sweater in the wintertime, it may cause a spark. And in some states, you can't leave the pump unattended. And in some states, they've actually ripped out on the pump handle where you can have it do what we call autofill. Usually you just set a little lever down underneath the grip and it holds it in place. But to make sure that people are pumping it now and not leaving it unattended, they've ripped it out. So that's pretty common. Read the instructions. When you come up to a pump, it's giving you that information. So just take a moment, look around, not only what type of gasoline and what kind of detergents and cleaners that they add to your gasoline, so you get the type that you really need, and to read the instructions of how to use a credit card or debit card. This I do want you to write down, okay? Very important to know the side of the car that has your fuel inlet. And if you look at your instrument panel, where your gas gauge is, it gives you a symbol of a gas pump with an arrow. that is the side that you're going to be pumping your gas at. And you should always leave yourself at least 3 feet. One, because you need to work getting the hose off the pump and into your car. But the other thing is what's going to happen when you or your passengers open up the door. If you're too close, you're going to bang into the pump or that white post in the front. Always lift up the pump handle in an upward position. When you do carry it to the car, make sure it's in that same position. Like I have shown you in the picture to the right, that metal nozzle still could have some gasoline. So if you were to tip that down, it's going to spill all over you. So always keep the metal nozzle up. Never carry it to the pump or to the car down. So that's basically some pointers on filling your car up with gas. It's going to get expensive. We've been very lucky for the last year and a half. It's been lingering in the low $2, but believe me, it wasn't too long ago, 3-4 years ago, it was over $4 a gallon. And if your parents are going to make you pay for gas when you go to the pump, it's going to cost you $30, $40, $50 to fill your car. Okay, so anything that you can do to save money, conserve fuel is going to help you. And like I said, I was going to show you that funny video. So here's the video. These are people that really, I have no idea how they ever got a license. No one must have taught them how to pump gas. This is one of my favorites. She went to the wrong side. She's going to try to put it over the top. It doesn't reach. She would have gone to the correct side. This guy is an attendant. It's all done. Pulls away without him taking it out. How about? Ouch. And he's going to pay for the damage, by the way. Now this is a real funny one. She doesn't know what side, so she goes around. All she's doing is going around the same side. Now she goes back to where she was before. Around the vehicle. At that point, just run away. See, that's bullshit. Notice the first time taking the video is out of the way. That gets happened by that tire sprocket off its axle. This is why you should always be paying attention at a gas station. You never know when people come in what's going to happen. So basically, that's everything I got for you. Now, I want you to get your state manual out. I've just put it up here on the... And we're going to kind of go through it little by little, and I'm just going to make a few comments, and I want you to underline a few things. Now, the unfortunate thing is the way that I teach driver's ed now, because it was really based upon the first manual that I had, and the one that I had was a little bit more lengthy than the one that they just gave us, 8 months ago, 9 months ago. So we had to jump around. It didn't go chronological in order. but we did cover everything from our first class till now. We've gone through the whole manual, so you should have read it. I would reread it and I would underline, or you should have been underlining things that I said, oh, this is important. This will probably be on the final. So now it's going to see who did good notes and who didn't do good notes. So let me tell you a few things about the final. It is all multiple choice. It's in the same format that we did with the midterm. So you're going to be going online at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and I'm going to give you a password. Then you're going to go to the remote Facebook page, and there will be a link like you did with the midterm. Hit the link, put in the password, you're good to go. It should not take you a long time. If you know your material, 100 questions should only take you about 45 minutes. But you're going to have the whole 90 minutes to do it. All right? Let's just say what happens if you don't do well. You will be given a retest if you score above a 65. If you're below a 65, we got serious issues. That means you did not attend enough classes or watch the videos, do the material, did the homework, know the material. Not good. It should not happen. If you're between a 65 and a 75 or 80, then you'll probably have a retest. Below a 65, you may have to take it again. Okay, I mean the class again. So don't do that. It only happens to a few people. So study, study, study. Study your notes. That was the most important thing, is taking your notes. The responsible driving gave you some good questions. The chapter questions weren't that difficult. Most all of you had at least 80% on every single one of them, so you weren't really missing many questions. A few here or there. But it was the notes. Notes are so important in watching the videos, or the classes, which I should say. So let's go through this little by little. On page 1, you really don't need to know too much here on page 1. Page 2, just be familiar with the 3 parts of your test: the vision test, written test, and then your driving test. So know those 3 parts. Also explains what will happen if you pass or fail. Section 2, you don't really need to know much about the classifications or the restrictions. If you do need to know a restriction, you should know corrective lenses. Real ID, you're not going to have to know that. Renewal, not really, not much there. Not much there. Vision fatigue we covered tonight. Distraction was last night. So I'd reread this, be familiar with it. Ways to avoid fatigue, we kind of talked about that tonight. Aggressive driving, we talked about road rage. So you should be familiar with that. Alcohol, put down in your notes. There's going to be at least 5 or 6 questions dealing with alcohol. And there were a lot of you that never changed the laws. Okay, that was something I asked you to do, and not very many people did it. So be familiar with the information that I gave you. So the information here is too brief, but the penalties that I gave you in your notes, you will be tested on. So know your definitions and know your penalties. Vehicle inspection, we should be familiar with that once a year during your owner's month of birth. We talked about how to get your car in good driving position. We talked about seatbelts, helmets, and airbags. So that's page 11 and 12. Towing a trailer, we didn't cover that, or securing a load. So reread that on page 12. So on page 12, make a note, look at that. Snow removal, should have mentioned this too, is that if you've got snow on your vehicle, it is the law that you have to pull over and remove it. If not, the police will give you a citation. It could be as much as $250 to $500. A lot of times they just have you clean it. So any part of your car, the hood, roof, trunk, all of it has to be cleared. Yielding right of way, you should be familiar with that. You should know all your speed limits. Know all your speed limits for your final. Communication, when to put your Directionals on, so 100 feet before a turn, 500 feet on a highway. When to use your headlights, when should they be turned on, that will be a question. Stopping distance we talked about, so know about reaction time, reaction distance, braking time, braking distance. So here's the definitions up here, the top part of 16. Changing lanes, should know the 4 parts of changing a lane. How to enter or leave an expressway. Passing we talked about when we had our highway unit. Backing out of a driveway we talked about. We talked about angle parking, perpendicular, parallel parking. So be familiar with all of those. Nighttime driving we kind of talked about tonight. And safety devices that we have on our vehicle to help us when we're in reverse. So we talked about that. Rules of the road, circle this or write down your notes. Section 6 is big. So know your colors, know your shapes. It's not going to be heavy signs like the midterm. Know your arrows, so know all this. Railroad crossings, pavement markings, know all your pavement markings. Construction zones, be familiar with that. That's a shared turn lane, you should be familiar with that. We talked about highway driving, so toll roads. One thing we didn't talk about U-turns. So take a look at that and read that. But that was from responsible driving, so that was covered. So we talked about that, and that was in your responsible driving, intersections, traffic circles, how to get in or out. School buses, remember, 25 feet behind with flashing red lights. All the parking where it's illegal. So we've got all these situations on page 28. There's our perpendicular angle parking, all the reference points that we kind of talked about. Searching, this is going to be big, so in your notes, write down section 8. You should read through, be familiar with knowing how to pick up where cars are coming from. Peripheral vision, scanning, our mirrors. Insurance, or how to handle an accident. We covered that. We did our accident report. Some of you still haven't provided that to me. Here's the insurance part on bottom of 32. Driving emergencies, we had a whole lesson. So we talked about going off the edge of the road, how to get out of a skid. Remember, the most important thing with driving emergencies is steering first before you implement braking or acceleration. So steer, steer, steer when you have an emergency. Keep your car where it should be going. So know about changing a tire blows out, all these things we talked about. Sharing the road, we talked about that with large trucks, motorcycles, and pedestrians. So reread that. Be familiar about the 3 feet from a bicyclist. That's important. There's a section on motorcycles. We did not cover slow-moving vehicles, so I want you to know that orange triangle is an indicator of a slow-moving vehicle. The vehicle is traveling less than 25. If the roadway is clear enough, you can get by when it's safe to. The no zone, remember that's a blind spot you should not be traveling in next to a truck. Turning, emergency vehicles, work zones, what to handle with police. And these are the questions. Unbelievable. They're only giving you 11 questions to study. That's not good. So what I did, let's see if I can pull this up here. If I can make this a little bit bigger. Well, anyways, see where it says driver education review questions? If you go to my YouTube channel, find where it says, it looks just like this. This is driver education review questions. This is your last homework assignment. what you need to do it either tonight or do it sometime tomorrow. I want you to try to answer the questions on your own. So I give you a question. Let's see if I can bring it up. I'll try to do this real quick. Okay, let's see if this goes. All right. If you go to the YouTube channel, okay, it's got all my classes that I've done, but if you look right here in the middle, it says Review Driver's Education Question. So if you click on it, there I am. So what I want you to do is to play this, sign in, and I will be asking you questions. Let's see if I can actually move this along a little bit. So this was the beginning of a class. Oh, this is what we just did. Okay, that's not the right one. Let me go back. Okay. All right, 5 months ago. Here it is. 5 months ago, driver education review questions. It runs for, if you are a resident of New Hampshire and want to drive a motor vehicle. Okay, there's a question. If you are a resident of New Hampshire and want to drive a motor vehicle, you must have a valid New Hampshire what? So that's the question. You need to answer it, and then I'm going to give you the answer. So I'm going to just play it so you just see one. You must have a valid New Hampshire driver's license. All right, so the next question's going to come up after that. So I want you, so it's only 17 minutes, but everybody's going to do this at a different time. So I just didn't want to put it on now and play it now. I want you to go find it on my YouTube channel. It's 5 months ago. Play it, stop it like I am right now. I stopped it. Try to answer the question on your own. If you got it right, you know it. If I gave you the question and you're looking at it and go, I have no idea what it is, just write it down and try to find it. That's how you're going to study. But I believe I'm giving you about 70 questions here to study. Some of them are going to be pretty much just like you're going to see tomorrow. So if you do well on this, you should do well on the final. So that is what I'm going to leave tonight's class with. So that's what I want you to do for the remainder of the time. It should only take you about 20, 25 minutes. And I want you to give me your score. So that's your homework assignment, is to send me your score. Mr. Toll, out of 70 questions, I had 50 right, 60 right. So that way I know how you did. And I'm going to compare it to how you do tomorrow. Does everybody understand? That is your homework for tonight, your last assignment, okay? So that is it for tonight. So I hope, see if I can get out of here. There we go. So if you have any questions, just text me and I'll try to answer them for you. But study, study, study. You should not fail this test tomorrow. So that's it for tonight. Good luck on the review questions. And if there's anything that I can answer for you, feel free tonight or tomorrow to ask me, and I'll try to get back to you. All right. See you tomorrow.